dedicated to the men of the New Zealand Forest Service who suffered great hardships for 8 weeks in rugged conditions, isolated from all outside contact. It is for these men of great courage and raw guts that this film was made. In January 1974, it was decided that a new hut be built in the Tararua to replace an old existing hut, Te Matawai. The old hut was built early this century by the members of the Matawai Tramping Club as a memorial to one of their fellow members. It was decided to be of a design to complement and blend with the surrounding bush. The original structure was constructed from materials milled on the site from existing bush, beech and totara being the trees that were used. These were cut down and cut into sections by hand saws and adzes. Then in 1974, the Forest Service decided to erect a new hut to replace the old one, which by now had become dilapidated and run down. After a year of haggling and red tape, moves got underway in June 1975. A team of forestry personnel assisted by the Matawai Tramping Club was sent in to demolish the old hut. It was agreed that the new hut be as close as possible to the old one, and so a site was picked and cleared. The materials from the old hut were bundled up and taken out by helicopter while the new hut was being brought in, so as not to leave rubbish lying around in the bush and cause unwanted environmental pollution. The Forest Service had an architect flown to the hut site so as to get an idea of what design would fit in with the surrounding bush and hills. The final design was to be practical and adventurous, with high sides and steep roof angles which were to be the main feature. But let us go right back to the start of the new hut. The materials were taken to the road end at Manukau. From here there are many tracks leading into the Tararuas once you get past the array of signs. There were 25,000 pounds of building materials and equipment to be packed up, tied and weighed. These were all noted and set aside in bundles made up for the helicopter. Tools, timber and food were all bound up ready to go, and extra items such as beer bottles filled with water were also packed carefully in bundles. 12 dozen of these and 100 cans were to be the main water supply up there, as there were no rivers nearby. The ranger in charge at Manukau, seen here on his daily inspections of road ends, has an area covering from the Mangahau River in the north to the Otaki Forks area in the south, and this area extends into the hills as far as the main range, giving him an area of approximately 100,000 acres. This area supports a variety of wildlife, both native and introduced, from birds to game animals such as deer, pigs and trampers. The hut is situated on the dividing ridge between the headwaters of the Ohau and Otaki rivers. The Ohau flows in an east to west direction and is the main water catchment for the central Manawatu. There is a tramping track up this river leading to the top of the Tararuas, and after about an hour one comes to a hut called Ohau Hut. This old hut was also built in the early 1900s and is due for replacement. Bridges crossing several side creeks enable people to get to this hut with dry feet, if you have the nerve to cross them. The next hut upriver is South Ohau Hut. This hut is arrived at by walking up the river for about 2 hours. If the river is in flood though, it could take a little longer. It is situated in a bushy setting and overlooks the river. Flying began early one morning and was expected to take about 3 days. Before starting, the machine was checked and greased, and when the OK was given, the hut began to roll. Each trip in with the load took about 20 minutes. Coming out took about 10, extra speed gained with no load. On the hut site, materials were stacked to one side to allow easy access for the chopper to drop its load. Organisation at the road end was almost panic stations, as it always is when flying materials with a helicopter. Each flight then was quite eventful, with a bit of wind blowing the machine around, but the view from that height made it worth it. People aren't the only ones to fly in choppers. The dogs belonging to some of the men were also flown in, much to the dogs' enjoyment. And then the last load comes in, just as night falls on the third day. All materials, food and men etc. are in, never to be seen or heard of for 8 weeks. Now it's time to get settled in. The first job is to build a tent camp where the men will stay for the duration. The tent was used as a sleeping quarters, while the section built on the front was used as a cooking and eating area. And of course, we couldn't forget good old Tally. Some materials from the new hut were used temporarily in the tent camp to give it that homely feeling. The tent camp had to be erected to withstand all weathers such as heavy rain and up to 2 feet of snow, which in that July was occasionally experienced. Lighting and power points were installed and hooked up to the generator. There was even a kitchen sink, stainless steel of course. In the mountains, one relies on ingenuity. Here, carpeting for the camp floor is manufactured on the site from local materials. Firewood was cut and the first fire was lit. And then came the unpacking of the food. What a delightful job, seeing all those cans. After a few days, it's washing clothes time and cutting firewood time and other camp chores. Next job on the agenda is a rubbish hole. Here the explosive expert lays a charge to break up the rock. Amongst the tranquility of the bush, the explosion seemed to upset a few of the native inhabitants. The hole was dug to a depth of about 8 feet, and a request for a front end digger was rejected. Something to do with transportation difficulties being the explanation. Also on the agenda was a good old bog. This was erected with great care as to make the door face a good view. Many arguments were had over the siting of this construction, as there is nothing worse than sitting down with a great nothing in front of you. Care must also be taken with tracks leading to the door, as a person could get in the poo if he or she can't find it in a hurry. And then the work actually begins on the new hut. Profiles were laid to give the general layout of the building, the men taking great care over accuracy. It must also be noted that the weather reverted to its normal self, with cold weather and showers. After the profiles were put down, the holes for the piles were put in. These were done by one man, as this man was the only one who could dig holes quickly. It only took half a day to dig 40 holes. That's not bad going considering the rocky ground. cut to length with care and skill. Work continues, and after the piles, the sleepers come next, and the job of the floor is noted. With the impressive surrounding countryside, it is hard not to gaze and wonder at nature's marvels. Here a tit rests on a sleeper before flying into the undergrowth. Smoko, and the men on the hut job take time off to have a brew with two of the New Zealand forest deer colours who happen to drop by. Meanwhile, back in the tent camp, it's time to relax and have a spell after 2 hours of hard work. With all the comforts of home, they relax amongst the familiar surroundings. But back on the hut, the floor is down, and with the help of Skill Store and Jenny, much of the hard work was eliminated. After the floor was nailed down, the sun poked its head out from behind a cloud, and the men could not resist but make the best of the situation. Besides, who would want to miss the rugby? With some bottles and cans of water, they slake their thirst and hope that it stays fine for at least another 6 weeks. But it doesn't stay fine. The next day brings rain and cold wind. Typical Tararua weather, but the work must go on, and the framing is erected. With cold body and colder hands, the men of the forestry carry on regardless. The next day is much the same as usual, and it is time for the large frames to be put into place. This was done with no effort at all, even after the ninth attempt. Up grows, and the main framework is almost finished. Two accidents occurred on the job, and this is one of them. This is what happens when one hits one's finger full pelt with a hammer. Instant pain. And this is what happens when one cuts one's leg with a chainsaw. More instant pain. Meanwhile, work on the rafters of the main cooking area carries on, and the heavy main beams are put in place. Breakfast time, and the men light a fire to swing the billy. For brekkies, the cook of the day prepares a meal which would leave Graham cursed and dead, because if it didn't kill him, it would sure make him crook. "10:30 a.m. and it's off to work." With some reluctance, the men push their bodies to the extremities of human endurance and begin another 3-hour day. From the top of the ridge, a deer culler surveys the scene and looks for deer, goats, or anything with 4 legs that moves, except the dogs, of course. All he sees is the new hut, standing out like a sore toe. This man is out hunting. He earns his living killing. He is a forestry culler. Here you see the dogs tearing a billy goat to pieces. See how the skin tears and the blood comes spurting out as its heart pumps its last pints of life out of itself. And then it's time for a smoke. Back at the hut, work goes on. Bats in the ceiling and on the walls help to insulate the hut against the harsh elements of the weather. After a frosty sort of night, the following morning could bring some unpleasant surprises, such as finding the wash basin completely frozen over. But a quick chop with a crowbar usually remedies the situation. Rain. There were buckets full. But if the next day turned out fine and sunny, it was worth it. So what if you had to work in it? This was the attitude of the men here. One could usually expect a fine day after 5 or 6 days of rain without fail, and this particular fine day was used to bring in more food and some materials to the hut by helicopter. It was discovered, however, that head office in Palmerston had made another blunder. They had not ordered enough food. Also, they had underestimated some material quantities. Problem: what to do? Answer: send a runner out with a message to send in some more. This was done, and after 2.5 weeks the runner got out to town, and the next day in came the helicopter. Oh, what joy, seeing that bumblebee of a machine bring mail, food and other goodies in. The men were elated, and the morale shot upwards 2.5 points out of 100. After the episode of contact with the outside world, it was back to work. Oh dear. The roof on the bunk room finished, and the men concentrated on the roof of the main room. On such a steep pitched roof, one would expect some sort of accident, but no, things went smoothly, all except for one person whose job it was to trim the ends of the purlins. He decided to do it deviously, and this is the result. Oh well, some never learn. Hands had to be protected from the bats, as the fibre could cause bad irritation. The roofing iron of the main room was put on in one day, beginning at lunchtime and finishing right on dark. Taut nerve, tension and utter hate of each other's guts would usually cause a fight amongst the dogs. Here we see a boomer of a fight. The victor stands alone. After that bit of entertainment, it's all go, go, go. Back on with the hut and the exterior lining. All nail holes in the iron had to be pre-punched and perfectly in line with each other. There were almost 14,000 lead-head nails used on the job and all put in by one man. What perseverance! On Sundays, the men would get up early, have a wash and put their best mocker on and go to work. Yes, work. They had the odd fine day up there in the mountains, but most of it was utterly foul. If it didn't blow, it would rain, and if it didn't rain, it would blow. Sometimes it even did both. One would have to expect that sort of weather up there in the high tops though. After all, they were nearly 3,500 feet up and just below bush level, and it was July, almost the middle of winter. Sometimes, though, it would rain and blow for days on end, buckets full of rain. The hut would get drenched, the bush would get soaked, and the rivers would rise to an abnormally high level. And where do you find these forestry men on these sort of days? Cutting firewood for the camp? No. Doing their washing? No. Working on the hut then? No way. One would find them inside the tent camp, usually eating, having a few beers or generally relaxing. Watching the old telly was a good pastime. The Adventures of Bambi were on, and they wouldn't miss that for the world. Some would even try out some secret recipes for pancakes or scones, etc., hoping that they would turn out okay, because food poisoning can be rather painful. Meanwhile, the hut stands alone, to be battered by the elements. Again, we have more examples of the typical weather conditions up there. 100-mile-an-hour gales, pelting rain and glorious mud. Mud for miles. Everywhere one would walk, one would have to negotiate seething cesspools with thick, pulsating torrents of mud. And who would work in these sort of conditions? Why, forestry men, of course. They love it. That's why they are still with the forestry. Crazy may be, but some nuts got to do it.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds, dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain, just singing in the rain, dancing in the rain. I'm happy again.
As time progresses, so does the hut. With the outside almost completed, work begins on the interior. Lining was fairly straightforward by using a new type of particle board. Cupboards and shelving were erected in the cooking area, and a large Maori bunk or flat deck was built in the bunk room area. Plumbing jobs were done in the tent camp's workshop section, which included arc welding equipment, presses and a giant iron cutter. After more lousy weather, the sun again poked its head out for the fourth time. The sun wasn't the only thing that came out. A few deer emerged from the bush, and in accordance with the Forest Service's noxious animal extermination policies, the men decided to try and bomb a few up. The roving camera crew was just one successful party, and will attempt to show how it's done. Note that hind by the stump in the middle of the picture. You can only see one, right? Well, watch closely after she has been shot, and you'll see another jump from behind the bush. Tricky things to see, those deer. They followed the blood trail for about 4 hours and finally came upon the dead carcass, where it was quickly tailed and disposed of. After a while, another deer was seen on an open face nearby, and they began to stalk it. After negotiating patches of leatherwood and crossing over steep and dangerous sections of scree, they were still not close enough to shoot at it, so they had to get closer. Stalking through the leatherwood was hard going, and it tended to make one curse all those deer. But then they were close enough for a shot, and here the slow motion camera captures the action. Deer was spotted and shot. Did the shooter miss? Yes, but he later explained it was intentional so that they could capture on film the way a deer takes off when shot at. And did all you hawkeyes out there see the other deer behind it take off also? Actually though, the shooter didn't miss the shot. They ran after it and found it stone cold dead in the grass. This deer's tail was also taken care of in the usual forestry manner, and then they headed back to camp. On arrival there, they found a hardened forestry worker taking a cold wash. He was actually caught in the act of taking his monthly shower. Nearby rock was a praying mantis, who itself started to preen its legs and feelers after seeing the forestry man preening himself. This variety of praying mantis is known as a Mantis Jeremia bullshivius by its Latin name. It stands at a height of about 4 foot and is carnivorous. That is, it eats meat of all kinds, but mainly the meat of Privates and Trampus stupidus, A variety of fast-moving slugs found in this region. A very aggressive animal, the mantis, but they have been known to be house-trained. Then we zoomed up to a giant weta, and it took much courage for this forestry chap to lift the beast up to the camera for a better look. Just look at those pincers. And again it's washing time. This time though it's clothes. The first time in 7 weeks these clothes were washed. And just look at that dirt. No white way washer up here, no siree. All tenderly washed by hand. What's going on here? The men can't be leaving, surely. But yes, they are. The call of the city beckons, the outside world calling them with tempting voices. 2 of the men get ready to leave, leaving the remaining men to do the odd small finishing job. With 7 weeks of grueling work behind them, they decide that that is enough, and now they have decided to stop. And so they leave the hut, leaving it as a monument to forestry personnel, so that those who go there will marvel in awe at this tribute to those great men who inhabit the hills, forestry men.